Here we go with the offseason free agency period. Here are some of the top free agents. Here are your quarterbacks, both Manning brothers, Derek Anderson, Brody Croyle, top quarterbacks here in free agency. Then you have Marshawn Lynch, another Kansas City Chief. Both Marshawn Lynch and Eli Manning are out with Tony Sparano as the new coach. Matt Forte, Willis McGahee, Mendenhall, some of the top running backs in this class of free agents. Then you have Calvin Johnson Jr. not able to get it done with Arizona. Decides to test free agency. He is going to be the hottest free agent probably on the market, even more so than Peyton Manning. Wes Welker, Malcolm Kelly, Jerome Simpson finishing up the top receivers. We look at tackles on the offensive line. We have Joe Staley, Ryan Clady, Jason Peters, and Vernon Carey, some of the top tackles being shuffled around the league. Tight ends, there's a weaker tight end class. I mean, Justin Keller, who went to the Super Bowl with the Dolphins, he kind of is the best option. Klopfenstein, Stevens, Barnage, all part of this tight end class. Now we get to defensive ends. So Calais Campbell, he is the number one defensive end. And I wanted to bring him back to the Eagles, but the Eagles are so tight with salary, they could not bring him back. So he is going to be a huge blessing to whoever can pick him up. We got Dwight Freeney, Red Bryant, Marcus Spears, some really big guys up front for any defense to pick up. Then we have Tommy Harris and Amobi Okoye, Chris Jenkins, John Henderson. Jenkins and Henderson, more of the older DTs. Tommy Harris is going to be a blessing to whoever can pick him up. Then we have linebackers. Now, this is where the Carolina Panthers are going to start to suffer. They lose Chris Jenkins to free agency. They're losing DeMarcus Ware to free agency, and they're losing David Harris to free agency. So they're that number one defense they've been having for so long, that powerhouse defense is falling apart. Manny Lawson for the Bengals, and then Eric Walden for Oakland. Safety is very star-studded. We have LaRon Landry, Brandon Merriweather, and Michael Griffin headlining the safeties. Tyvon Branch, also a young prospect for anyone who wants to pick him up. As for cornerback, we have Darrelle Revis testing free agency, leaving Tampa Bay. Aqib Talib from Pittsburgh, Lito Shepard, the veteran, and then Leotis McKelvin also finishing up the top cornerbacks in this class. So I will be breaking down the teams and how they went about free agency. And here we go. The Atlanta Falcons. This is the team that lands quarterback Peyton Manning. So this is just insane for me. I mean, we had so many different teams that were vying for Peyton Manning. I mean, basically anything that really needed a QB or should have had an upgrade. But what's happening here is that Jason Campbell has been a very good quarterback for the Atlanta Falcons. The problem is he has not been able to make a Super Bowl, and the chance to get Peyton Manning is something that they just did not want to pass up. And so with that in mind, we see the Falcons really having a unique opportunity here on offense with Peyton Manning passing to Larry Fitzgerald. Fitzgerald is someone that has never had other than Kurt Warner in real life, has never really had an effective quarterback, someone like Manning. Now there is Caleb Haney, the backup quarterback for Manning. You can't expect them to probably trade away Jason Campbell. They'll probably grab some draft picks for him. So we can expect that from the Falcons. Now, to pair with Peyton Manning, we have Willis McGahee. So McGahee is a veteran running back from the Rams. He is now finally getting his chance with Peyton Manning. He's been with the Rams for quite a long time. McGahee has been a very good running back. So they needed someone there to replace Matt Forte, and they believe Willis McGahee is going to be that guy. They also bring in Vickerson. So Vickerson from New England helps them with their front, their defensive front, good nose tackle. Continuing on, they have Nick Bellore from the Bengals. Jordan Gross, they bring him back because they originally drafted Gross to protect Michael Vick's blind side on the right side, and now they are going back to bring him to the team. And lastly, they do sign Jeff Reed as well. And there's your Atlanta Falcons. The Carolina Panthers. Now, they have been absolutely decimated on defense. This has definitely not been the kind of offseason they wanted, but it was about time because they had such a powerhouse team on defense, and you can't keep paying a team like that. You have to start to make some cuts and let some people go. So they lose people like Aaron Campman, Chris Jenkins, Kiwanta Dawson, David Harris, DeMarcus Ware, Alfonso Smith, Hussein Abdullah. So their defense is in shambles. So how do they move on? So they do sign the veteran LeVar Arrington, and then more of the journeyman Philip Wheeler, kind of in his prime age. They do sign Tavares Gooden from the Bengals, along with Kevin Williams from the Bengals. So they get they pick up 3 linebackers and Kevin Williams. And then on offense, they do pick up the wide receiver from the Bengals, Devin Thomas. I didn't realize I had so many Bengals going to the Carolina Panthers. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers also making some moves. So they pick up Jason Peters on the left side of their line. That is a really good improvement there for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You can also see they bring in Barry Richardson. So this is solidifying that left side of their offensive line. They do have Evan Mathis as their starting left guard, but Barry Richardson comes in there to be a solid backup for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. On offense, they do sign Mike Tolbert, as Oslot has been kind of gone for a bit. I believe he retired, I don't know how long ago. They do sign wide receiver Jerome Simpson. So they do already have Jeremy Maclin. They have Mark Clayton. Now, Mark Clayton is 30 years old, and they had Maclin, who's 24. But they really needed to find a way to get another pass catcher, and so they pick up the New York Giant Jerome Simpson, who has been very good with the Giants, one of their top receivers. But lastly, they do pick up Dominic Rodgers-Cromartie from the Jets, and this is a big pickup for them. So their cornerbacks from Cedric Griffin, Ladarius Webb, Scott Starks, no one really specific that it can be their number one guy. Ladarius Webb probably is the best thing. But because they lost Darrelle Revis, they needed to find a change, and they bring in Rodgers-Cromartie. Here we go with the New Orleans Saints. They go with a quarterback backup for Tim Tebow and Kevin Cobb coming over from the Eagles. They did lose their one running back, Felix Jones. They still have LaDainian Tomlinson, who's 33 years old and gets injured all the time. So they needed to get a solid running back. They may likely go for someone in the draft, but we see them pick up Rashard Mendenhall from the Seattle Seahawks to be kind of maybe the load-carrying back. They do sign Kiwanta Dawson from the Carolina Panthers, so they take a strength of their rival and they bring it to their own. And then they also bring in Tyvon Branch as strong safety. So this is a big improvement there for their defensive backfield and their defense in general. They had Jasper Brinkley and Pat Angerer, but picking up Kiwanta Dawson is good for their linebacking core. And of course, safety. They're dealing with Sabby Piscatelli and Joe LaFegid. And so they really needed to find a way to get some power in their DBs to pair with Patrick Peterson at cornerback. And so Tyvon Branch gives them an 80 overall safety and a great addition to this team. The Dallas Cowboys make a few moves. They do let go of some of their other players that were very reliable, so they decide to get a decent backup here. They pick up Ryan Fitzpatrick, who could be a potential starter. They may look for a quarterback in the draft. They do let Tony Romo walk. We see Mike Shanahan really trying to make some changes here to the team. They are keeping Joe Webb, so we might have Ryan Fitzpatrick and Joe Webb battling it out. They do pick up a veteran linebacker, probably someone they didn't really need to pick up. They have Nick Barnett, who's 73 overall, 31 years old. They've tried to pick up people like Gerald McGrath and Mike McLaughlin, just a lot of nobodies. So Al Wilson is kind of some depth for this Cowboys defense. However, these next two signings are much more impressive. They do end up landing the #1 defensive end in the league, Calais Campbell, and they take him from the Eagles. So now all of a sudden and they pick up John Henderson, where they do have Terrell McLean, a draft pick last year. They add John Henderson, the 33-year-old nose tackle. So you have Campbell and you have Charles Johnson also on the D-line that they had from years before. They're picking up some solid defensive players here, and they have Arakpo. They have Jimmy Smith in their first-round pick last year. Eric Berry, first-round pick about 3 years ago. They have Eric Weddle. So this Dallas team, if they can get their quarterback situation figured out, I mean, with Peterson and so forth, they've got a lot of weapons. But we need to see if this defense can be the answer. So the Philadelphia Eagles trying to replace a few key parts. They don't have the biggest budget, but they do pick up Chris Gokong, and this gives them some more depth in their linebacking core. We see KJ Wright they drafted last year. He's going to be a likely long-term starter for them. Ray Maluga. But Chris Gokong is going to add some depth to that team. It can even be a possible starter if they don't decide to draft anybody or if they can't bring anybody else in. They do pick up Reggie Wells, who is a solid starter on the offensive line. Continuing on, we see Eric Walden and their replacement for Lito Shepherd, Leotis McKelvin from the Atlanta Falcons. So McKelvin is a solid cornerback. He's someone that is 27 years old. He should be the go-to defensive back. So he's in that kind of prime age. Good addition here to make up for losing the likes of someone like Lito Shepherd. The Eagles doing their part with a very limited budget, still making things happen. The New York Giants bring in offensive guard Chad Reinhardt and center Jeremy Newberry. And so with these additions, Newberry and Reinhardt both are expected to start for this team to give Carson Palmer some more depth, some more help. They also bring in tight end Gary Barnidge from Cleveland. He's probably going to be a backup to Jimmy Graham, but he is a 6'6", 243-pound guy, 26 years old, 63 overall. He's not, the greatest tight end. I think he's ranked 72nd, but he is someone that can be a good role player if given the right opportunity. They did sign a big free agent acquisition in Okoye. He's one of the top defensive tackles in my league. So picking him up, I think he's the 10th ranked defensive tackle. So bringing him to New York is a great addition for them. And then they did sign a backup quarterback, Eric Ainge. He's in the Packers uniform there, but he wasn't on a team last year. He's going to be behind Jonathan Crompton as the backup for a 32-year-old Carson Palmer. The Washington Commanders are very silent here in free agency. They pick up a wide receiver in Devon Bess, trying to give them some more depth on that receiving core, but he's behind Vincent Jackson and Darius Haywood-Bay. But Jonathan Baldwin was drafted last year, very high. I think he was a first-round draft pick, but he's not obviously going to pan out. So Bess has some more depth. They did sign DT CJ Mosley from the Rams, and he is their top DT there because they had some depth issues, especially losing Tommy Harris. CJ Mosley is not anywhere near Tommy Harris's caliber, but they do what they can. And then they do sign a backup quarterback who happens to be Michael Vick's brother. So we have Michael Vick and Marcus Vick on the Washington Commanders. That's the best they're going to be able to do right now. I've got two M. Vicks on this Washington Commanders team. The Arizona Cardinals are also a team that is a bit more laid back. Andy Dalton is their quarterback, but they signed Matt Leinart from the Saints to be the backup. I just thought it was nice because Leinart did play for the Cardinals in real life, so here he is joining the team a little bit late, but being a backup for them. They do sign Dustin Fry, the 28-year-old, so he's going to be on the offensive line with Andre Smith, Nick Mangold, Logan Mankins, and King Dunlap, and he is going to be able to fill in that left guard spot for the Arizona Cardinals. But the biggest acquisition, and this is the biggest win for them, is getting David Harris, an outside linebacker from the Carolina Panthers. So again, Harris was part of that legendary Panthers defense. He is going to be opposite Navarro Bowman and Justin Tuck. So this is one of the best linebackers in the league. I think he's ranked number 3 out of all of the right outside linebackers. The only outside linebackers who are better than him are Von Miller, and he's tied with Thomas Davis at 85 overall. And so, I mean, there is DeMarcus Ware and Lawrence Timmons, Clay Matthews on the left. But again, you get one of these top linebackers on a team like the Arizona Cardinals, and that's only good things for a team that made the playoffs last year and are going to try to make a run for the Super Bowl. Now we have the San Francisco 49ers. Now the 49ers lost LaRon Landry. And LaRon Landry, as you would think, is the number 1 safety in the league. Well, when you can't keep your all-star safety, then you got to go and try to get another safety. And the 49ers were able to bring in Brandon Merriweather from the Colts. And this is a major, I thought that the 49ers were going to take a major leap back, but picking up Brandon Merriweather, you're just swapping number 1 for number 2. Although I wanted to kind of keep Landry with the 49ers, that didn't happen, but Merriweather stays. They sign a linebacker, James Anderson. This guy is going to be a solid starter for them. They do have Sergio Kindle and Ahmad Brooks on that linebacking core, but James Anderson gives them a 28-year-old, 70 overall to help with this 49ers defense that just won the Super Bowl. They did sign 2 O-linemen, Pat McQuistion from the Cleveland Browns. He will likely be their right guard starter. And Will Montgomery, a 70 overall, 29-year-old, giving Brees some more offensive line support on that interior center right side of the line. Now, the St. Louis Rams get really busy. We see them pick up Mark Bulger, as they have not had Mark Bulger on the team ever since he was traded to Baltimore back in my very first season in 2002-2003. But he will come from Pittsburgh to be the backup for likely Andrew Luck when he becomes the number 1 overall pick on my draft episode. Sorry for the spoiler, but I think we all know what's going to happen. Either him or RG3, I guess, so I can keep you in a little bit of suspense. They do sign Joe Klopfenstein, so he's going to be the backup for Martellus Bennett as a tight end. He was one of the more sought-after tight ends. I don't have that many that were in free agency that were available. He's only the 43rd ranked, but he is who the Rams have. They did sign a running back to kind of replace Willis McGahee, or at least give us a transition. Because they did draft Mikel LaShore. They have Aaron Brown. But losing Willis McGahee is a huge part of that offense. So they do sign Tim Hightower, the backup for the Philadelphia Eagles. So he's going to be the main man in St. Louis. They do sign Kendrell Bell from Pittsburgh. Bell has been kind of bouncing around the league, but he is the backup, or if they decide to run with 2 middle linebackers, he's right behind Curtis Lofton in a decent defense or linebacking core for the Rams. They do sign Brandon Flowers and H.B. Blades. Blades was drafted by the Chiefs, but then he wasn't signed by any team last year. But they try to get some more linebacker depth because they have Sean Phillips, who's 31 at 68 overall, and then H.B. Blades, who's 27 at 67 overall. So that's where they get some more depth in that their outside linebacking team. But they do sign Brandon Flowers, and so he's a 78 overall, 26-year-old. They definitely needed some help in their defensive backs. They have Chris Culliver, a draft pick last year, who's 72 overall, and that's basically it. Everyone is downhill from there. So they make some splashes there on defense. They do also sign Josh Brown as kicker and Michael Conan as punter. The Seattle Seahawks have also been busy here. They end up getting Eli Manning. So the first move that Pete Carroll makes is not focusing on the draft for his quarterback, but he ends up landing Peyton Manning's brother Eli, who has been with the Kansas City Chiefs. He's their second most pass yard leader of all time with the Kansas City Chiefs. He is now moving on to Seattle into the NFC. Also joining him is Marshawn Lynch. Now, I wasn't planning on Marshawn Lynch. I had several teams give him an offer, but here he is. He does beast mode, goes to Seattle. So the Chiefs are becoming the Seattle Seahawks. They do also bring in Matt Flynn as a backup quarterback. So Matt Flynn, just like in real life, he left the Packers to go to the Seahawks. And then they drafted, of course, Russell Wilson. In my franchise, he leaves Houston, and he is the backup for Eli Manning. They also bring in Julian Peterson, so they take their rivals, 34-year-old, 78 overall linebacker Julian Peterson, and he is going to be that depth they need on their defense. They pick up some O-linemen, so we see Chris Kimawatu along with Khalif Barnes. So both of them are adding some depth here for the Seattle Seahawks. Then they also bring in Charlie Johnson as left tackle. So they lost Ryan Clady, so they're now bringing Charlie Johnson, who is going to be their blindside blocker for Eli Manning. Going on, they have cornerbacks added like Jarrett Bush and Justin Miller. As you can see, Pete Carroll has been very busy this offseason. So you see Justin Miller, 28 years old, Jarrett Bush, 28 years old. So Houston and San Francisco really plugging in here for this Seattle Seahawks team. Also, the Seahawks add Josh Morgan, a wide receiver from the Patriots, to their passing core. I think this is a great addition for them. Josh Morgan has a lot of big plays for New England. The now 27-year-old wide receiver is going to be a big help for Eli Manning. Chicago finally lands their all-star defensive tackle, and you can see Tommy Harris, the 92 overall, 28-year-old. He is the second-ranked defensive tackle behind Haloti Ngata from the San Francisco 49ers. They also bring in Eagles' Lito Shepherd, and really before then they had Byron Maxwell and Cresden Butler, both 25, 24, 72 overalls. Not bad, right? But they're not an 84 overall. Now, Shepherd is 31 years old. He's aging, but for a team that is trying to compete in what really is a weak division. I mean, the Vikings and the Lions are awful last year. The Packers were good, but they aren't invincible. So the Bears are able to make those adjustments. They bring in now tight ends Dustin Keller, and they sign Ben Patrick. So Ben Patrick was with the Texans. I think he was released by them. He was a free agent heading into free agency. Dustin Keller just came off the AFC Championship victory, but the Super Bowl loss with the Miami Dolphins, now joining Chicago. Eddie Royal, the receiver from the Minnesota Vikings, decides to quit on the Vikings and go to the division rival, the Bears. He is the 38th ranked wide receiver, so he is now joining Golden Tate, Kevin Ogletree, Andre Roberts with this Chicago Bears team. They also bring in Jeff Otah at their left tackle, so he's a 26-year-old, 72 overall, blindside blocker there for most likely Mark Sanchez. The Detroit Lions are in a coaching change with Rob Ryan from the New England Patriots. We have Josh McCown coming in as the potential starter for them. I do anticipate that the Detroit Lions will make a move at quarterback in the draft, especially when you have, I don't think they're going to be able to get Russell Wilson or Andrew Luck. That's likely number one, number two. But Ryan Tannehill, Brandon Weeden, Osweiler, Russell Wilson, Kirk Cousins, one of them is going to be available. So they're going to probably land one of them. But Josh McCown being that veteran, 33-year-old transition quarterback is good. They do bring in Mario Manningham from the Dallas Cowboys. He is going to be paired up with Jason Hill, Armonte Edwards, Austin Pettis. They might decide to make a move in the draft too, but Manningham, kind of the free agent assistance there. They do bring in offensive line help, so they bring in Maurice Williams after getting rid of Jordan Gross. They got rid of the veteran to bring in a different veteran, but he's a little bit more cost effective. And then they also have Jarvis Moss from the Pittsburgh Steelers. He is now getting a chance there to just be some more depth for their pass rush. So the Green Bay Packers land DeMarcus Ware. Now this was a weird signing for me because they have Sean Merriman, who's 28 at 83 overall. They also drafted Von Miller, 88 overall, 23-year-old. So they bring in DeMarcus Ware, and I'm thinking that they have Daniel Ellerbe at middle linebacker, but it was just trying to go for one of the biggest players in the league. And so now they have three of some of the best linebackers in the NFL. DeMarcus Ware is, in fact, the best left outside linebacker in the league and best linebacker. And then you have Sean Merriman, who's fifth best, and Von Miller, who is second best on the right side or who's number one on the right outside linebacker. So the linebacking core is going to be something I have to work on with the depth chart to really make sure that these three studs are playing as much as possible or in the right situations. In addition to DeMarcus Ware, we see them sign two quarterbacks, Drew Stanton and Jeff Smoker. So these are two backup quarterbacks that will be behind Matthew Stafford. They had Matt Hasselbeck retire, and then we saw some moves going away from Green Bay. Let's see, who was the guy that they lost? It was David Garrard. So they're going more with the standard Stanton and Smoker as their backup quarterbacks. They do make a move for wide receiver. Now, I don't believe Stallworth is going to play that much, but we have Randall Cobb, Antonio Brown, Julian Edelman, all under 26 years old. So Stallworth comes in as a veteran receiving option. I may decide to keep him. I may decide to cut him. But coming from Cincinnati, Stallworth is just that veteran presence. They do sign Martrez Milner as a tight end, so he's going to be a backup behind Jordan Cameron, and he's he's with Tony Moecki as well. On the defensive side of the ball, they bring in defensive end Ray Edwards. So he's 78 overall. He's their best defensive end. And they also bring in Doug Jolly. And I believe Doug Jolly played for the Packers in real life. So they have Vince Wilfork and then Doug Jolly. There was Darnell Dockett that also hit free agency that left the Green Bay Packers. And so he's sitting there in free agency. And the Green Bay Packers really, I think they're potential free agency winners just getting DeMarcus Ware. You get the best defensive player in the game. That is just absolutely insane. And they're going to be very, very tough to beat. The Minnesota Vikings land Joe Staley at left tackle. So this is a big, big help for them. Joe Staley was a great blindside blocker for Ben Roethlisberger, and now he's going to go off to the Minnesota Vikings. And as we just talked about with the Packers, one of the most difficult pass rushes in the league. Joe Staley himself is actually the 9th-ranked best offensive tackle in the league at 28 years old. Moving on, they have some defensive improvements. So as we can see, they had Jared Allen at 30 years old, and now they bring in Dwight Freeney at 32. He's an 81 overall right end who happens to be the 7th best pass rusher in the league, or at least the best right end in the league. They signed Chase Blackburn, veteran presence there. Dakota Watson might still be the starter, who's a 24-year-old, 70 overall, but Blackburn's a 72 overall, 29-year-old, giving more depth to this Minnesota Vikings defense. Adding some more star power, they already had Leon Hall, but they now bring in Aqib Talib from Pittsburgh. That's an 85 overall, 26-year-old. This is a major improvement for this team. Then they had some safety challenges because they lost Michael Griffin. So they do sign Tom Zbikowski from the Houston Texans. He kind of is going to be filling that role of safety that they desperately need filled, because once you lose an all-star like Michael Griffin, you got to do the best you can to cope with that. And so Zbikowski is the best they can do. The Denver Broncos were pretty busy in free agency. They do sign Jay Cutler, who is going to likely be a challenger for Sam Bradford, who has been god-awful since he's entered the league. He's in his he's going to be heading into his third season, so Jay Cutler will challenge him for the starting position. If Jay Cutler doesn't win it, he might just he may come in later in the season. Dennis Dixon is the backup, and we see Dennis Dixon there from the Atlanta Falcons, moving on from Atlanta to Denver. Denver also brings in a backup tight end, Craig Stevens. So they do have Bubba Franks, who's 34 years old and 74 overall. Stevens gives them a 68 overall, 28-year-old. I may decide to use Stevens maybe more often than Franks if I'm going to try to transition off the old man. They do sign center Dan Coppin, 32-year-old old man, but he is just to be an anchor in the middle of that offensive line. Keeping on the busyness, they pick up some defensive players. So we see Hussein Abdullah coming from the absolutely stellar Carolina Panthers. He's the backup safety for the Panthers because the Panthers were rocking with the dual safeties who they still have currently, Michael Huff and Daniel Manning. But Abdullah was the backup behind Michael Huff, and now he's going to get his chance to be the starter here with the Denver Broncos. We have Jordan Dizon, who's behind Keith Farwell, but I don't believe he's going to get the start. I mean, he's 26-year-old, 68 overall. We'll see what improvements can be made. Not a solid middle linebacking core for Denver. But then they do pick up, despite being a weaker team where you might go for more younger talent, they do sign Justin Smith because Aaron Maben, a 24-year-old, 70 overall, is not cutting it. So Justin Smith, the veteran from the Cincinnati Bengals, comes over to be a pass rusher for the Denver Broncos. The San Diego Chargers pick up a running back in Marion Barber, the former Jacksonville Jaguars running back. They do lose Larry Johnson, so they have Beanie Wells as their likely starting running back, and Barber is their dual back, or their kind of replacement back. They did bring in Jacob Hester from the Cincinnati Bengals, who is their fullback. Despite having a pretty solid receiving core, they did bring in Steve Smith Sr., so we see Santonio Holmes as their starter, Devin Hester, who's their speedster return man. Lee Evans is 31, 68 overall. He's starting to decline. I've been trying to, like Damian Williams did not work out as well for them. Dwayne Harris didn't work out as expected. So they bring in Steve Smith to be a receiving target for Aaron Rodgers. Then we have Antonio Gates at tight end and Brad Cottam joining the tight end room to be the backup for Antonio Gates. On the defensive side of the ball, we see Red Bryant being signed. He is going to be likely their right end and their starter. Chris Chester coming in as a 76 overall center, kind of that core part of the offensive line. Kansas City has decided to move on from Eli Manning. They decided the 31-year-old quarterback is done. So now we have Kevin O'Connell being signed. I don't expect O'Connell to be the starter. I think the Chiefs will go for a Tannehill. They'll go for Russell Wilson or Whedon, somebody like that, because O'Connell is kind of like that journeyman quarterback that's going to get a chance to start but probably won't. They do sign Kevin Smith from the Vikings because they need a running back. They lost Marshawn Lynch. So losing your quarterback and your halfback, Tony Sperano has some decisions to make, and he is bringing in some suitable replacements. In addition, you see center Jamal Jackson, the 30-year-old veteran, 78 overall, comes in at center. Jamal Jackson does, in fact, rank the 6th best center in the league. Again, 78 overall. I don't have my stuff progressing as fast as most. They bring in Joe Mays just to be kind of a backup for Lofa Tatupu in the middle linebacking core. And there you go. There's your Kansas City Chiefs additions. They didn't make too many moves. They still have a solid defense. They do have their Tim Jennings and Jonathan Joseph, 2 90s in 90 overalls in their defensive backfield. They have Jason Pierre-Paul. So they have some good pieces that they're going to try to build around. But we'll see if some of these offensive adjustments can be helpful. The Oakland Raiders also make a big splash in free agency. They signed the former defensive tackle for the Carolina Panthers, Chris Jenkins. Yes, he's 33 years old, 83 overall, but he has been an anchor for that defense. He's the 7th best ranked defensive tackle. So John McCargo, who is their current defensive tackle, they get an upgrade tremendously. They also sign Lorenzo Alexander, who's probably going to be more of a backup linebacker, depending on how Channing Crowder or Barrett Ruud can manage their starting position. They do sign the running back from the Arizona Cardinals, Jalen Parmalee, 72 overall, 26-year-old, kind of the bruiser back for Arizona. And they bring in some offensive line help with Aaron Sears, who will likely be their starter on the right side of the line. The Pittsburgh Steelers have some work to do after losing their left tackle. So they bring in 26-year-old Ryan Clady from the Seattle Seahawks, and they bring in big man Derek Anderson. So they have 88 overall, 30-year-old Ben Roethlisberger, and 29-year-old, 79 overall Derek Anderson. Ben Roethlisberger 6'5", Derek Anderson 6'6". So two strong arm quarterbacks, just fitting right within their system. They also bring in a Browns player in Jim Leonard. And Jim Leonard is going to be the backup to the number one safety in the league, Dante Whitner. And they also bring in a cornerback since they lost some support there. Because David Jones, Jason McCourty, Tremaine Brock, all decent players, Keenan Lewis. They do bring in Orlando Scandrick to bring some more depth for their defensive backs. Cleveland is on the move. They're trying to find a backup quarterback that's more suited for their team. And with Terrell Pryor as their starting quarterback, they do sign Josh Johnson from their division rival, the Baltimore Ravens, to be the backup quarterback in Cleveland. They also go for some offensive line support. We see they do have Marquise Pouncey at center, who's 23, 76 overall. They signed Dan Connolly as a backup. He's a 72 overall. He can kind of be the backup for anything on the interior line. They do sign Darren College to fill the void of Paul McQuistion leaving them. So Darren College is 30 years old, 75 overall, just sort of a replacement kind of right guard. Darren College is the 18th ranked guard despite being a lower overall. Then we look at we see the big splash was getting Felix Jones from the New Orleans Saints after Steve Slayton left them for free agency. We see Joique Bell, Chris Obanaya. They needed some help on the running game, so they bring in Felix Jones for that. They do sign Philip Merling as a defensive end, so he's behind Cameron Wimbley, just trying to get a backup there for Cleveland. They do sign Mike Adams as a backup safety behind T.J. Ward. Adams is 31 years old. He was a real Brown in real life. I did always like him as a player, so I wanted to bring him to Cleveland. As for a cornerback, they signed Drew Coleman, a former Baltimore Ravens defensive back, so they get another division rival opponent on their team. The Baltimore Ravens are active, getting a backup since they lost Josh Johnson. They want someone to support Kaepernick, so they end up going with David Garrard. I think that's a good addition for them because when you have a rookie like Kaepernick, David Garrard does have the mentor trait, and so I wanted to make sure we got a mentor for the young quarterback. On defense, they do pick up their division rivals' top linebacker, 28-year-old Manny Lawson. Manny Lawson is the 8th ranked left outside linebacker at 79 overall. And they also have Kyle Arrington they got from the Jaguars, 25-year-old, 73-year-old, just some more depth for their defensive backfield. Bouncing back to offense, we see the Ravens pick up Justin Forsett, and they did this signing in real life, picking up Forsett used to be with the Seahawks in real life, but he was on my Buffalo Bills in this reality. So he ends up getting he's going to be behind Ray Rice, but he's going to be the backup running back for him. They do bring in Donnie Avery as well. So we have Dwayne Bowe, Demaryius Thomas, and then it dropped from like a 77 overall to 63 overall Cecil Shorts. So bringing Donnie Avery, they sort of get their slot receiver, which they desperately needed, especially to give Colin Kaepernick another weapon. On the defensive line, they do pick up Marcus Spears, who's a 76 overall defensive end, 29-year-old, big man. He's the 18th ranked guy, 307 pounds, 6'4". They needed some more depth on this. Not depth, but they needed a solid starter on this defensive line. So they have Lamar Houston and now Marcus Spears heading up this front line. Well, Jarrell Casey, Brandon Mibane at DT, and they signed Jason Jones for some more depth on their defensive front. The Cincinnati Bengals, under new head coach John Harbaugh, make a splash in free agency. First thing they do is they sign quarterback Brodie Croyle, one of the top quarterbacks in free agency. We expect them to make some sort of draft pick as well. They have John Skelton, and now they bring in Brodie Croyle, who was good for Detroit, but started to fall off the performance. Started to dwindle in his late part of his career. We'll see if he can be revived here in Cincinnati. They do sign Rocky McIntosh from the Jets, and who used to be a former Browns player, likely a backup here for the Cincinnati Bengals. They also sign wide receiver James Hardy, so this is finally getting some younger options. They do have Aurelius Benz, who's 23, Terrence Austin, 63 overall. They do still have Anquan Bolden, who's a 31-year-old, 74 overall wide receiver, but James Hardy was Matt Ryan's number one guy, and he is 26 years old and 73 overall. So Hardy is a very solid receiving option that they pick up here. They also bring in some more depth with Anthony McCoy, who's going to be likely the third tight end on this Bengals team. There's a few defensive players that they added. We see Jameel McClain for their middle linebacker. He's behind Adam Hayward. And then they also signed Rob Ninkovich from the Tennessee Titans, who will likely be their starter on the left outside linebacker spot. More defensive players on the D-line.
The Seahawks also acquire wide receiver Josh Morgan
49er,
from the New England Patriots.
defensive tackle.
This is a big addition for
from,
them because they've
San Francisco to Cincinnati.
Can't even
They do have
fucking
Gerald McCoy as their starting
I can add this
DT, a
fucking
24-year-old 80 overall DT. Kentron Balmer is 25 years old and 73 overall, but still better than Terrence Knighton, who is a 69 overall 26-year-old. Since they lost Jason Smith, they do need to get some help with their linebackers and defensive ends. So William Hayes comes in at left end, a 71 overall, 27-year-old. As for pass protection, they sign left tackle from Chicago, Damian Cook. However, they do have sophomore Anthony Costanzo, their first-round pick last year, who's 24 years old, 74 overall. I just signed Damian Cook, who's 78 years old, but he's 33. So I want Costanzo to start, but Cook to be the backup. They did sign Corey Lichtensteiger. I won't even try that name again. To be their center. Major gap there that they needed some help with. And then they do sign the fullback from the Jets, David Kurtman. And we can see that's going to help their running game tremendously because Noshawn Marino needs some help. And then lastly, the Bengals bring in Isaiah Thomas and Graham Gano. Isaiah Thomas, I don't even know where he exists. He's in a second year in the league. I think he was an undrafted person, and so he's added to some depth for the Cincinnati Bengals. The Buffalo Bills decide to go for the 33-year-old aging running back Deuce McAllister from their division rival, the Miami Dolphins. Dolphins had some great success with McAllister as their running back. The Bills do have D'Angelo Williams, and then they have Lawrence Maroney, Deji Karim, but all a lot of old running backs, and I'll have to see how I want to play this. I mean, they do have a sophomore, I think it's a practice squad player, Daniel Thomas, who is 24 years old, so he might actually make the team if I wanted to get some youth on this team. They do sign Anthony Collins, who was one of the top offensive guards in the free agency section. He's 18th ranked left guard, and he is going to the Bills. And so they have Jake Long, they have Evan Smith at center, Jahari Evans, and DeMar Dotson, the 6'9" right tackle. So he's going to be joining that offensive line. Then they also bring in wide receiver from Seattle, Danny Amendola. He is the right behind Jacoby Jones, who's 28, 83 overall. Amendola is 26 years old, 75 overall, but he's better than Mike Sims-Walker, better than Patrick Turner, Chris Durham. Just a lot of trash there, so he's some added depth. Now, this guy, DeJuan Morgan, I love this guy. I mean, he was a solid safety for the San Francisco 49ers, but he always played behind LaRon Landry, so he never got a chance to really start. With the Buffalo Bills, this 26-year-old, 73 overall free safety is going to be a starter. He is the 35th ranked safety in the league, but he gets a starting opportunity here with the Buffalo Bills. Now, the Miami Dolphins might have just won the entire free agency. So even though they failed to win the Super Bowl, they win Calvin Johnson Jr. So Calvin Johnson decides to go with the team he thinks he can win a Super Bowl with. He's got Cam Newton as quarterback. And then they also bring in Matt Forte from the Atlanta Falcons, who's 26 years old, 81 overall. The biggest problem with the Dolphins is that they had all these old running backs, and ironically, now Buffalo is having the old running backs. But they went from all these older guys like Steven Jackson and Deuce McAllister to Matt Forte. They're keeping Joe McKnight. They still have Steven Jackson, who's 29 years old, but they also have Ryan Williams, who could be a potential third-string backup. So they pick up one of the best running backs in the league, who is the 17th ranked, but he's been very explosive. They have Cam Newton, who's a rising star, who made a Super Bowl in his rookie year. And they have Calvin Johnson with Jordy Nelson and then veteran Michael Jenkins. They also have Brian Hartline, who's made plays. So as of right now, they're leading the way here for the best offseason. We see tight end Fred Davis come in, who's 26 years old, 71 overall, filling in for Dustin Keller at tight end. And quite frankly, I'd kind of almost rather have Fred Davis. I think Fred Davis is a better tight end than Dustin Keller. Even though Dustin Keller's a little bit older and he has a little bit higher overall, I think Fred Davis is the better guy. They also bring in veteran pass rusher Patrick Kearney. They do have Pernell McPhee, who could be there. He's 23 years old. He'll probably be the starter. But Patrick Kearney, the 35-year-old, is going to bring a veteran presence to this Super Bowl hungry team. The New York Jets bring in one of the top receivers in this offseason, whereas they weren't able to land Calvin Johnson Jr. They were able to bring in 80 overall, 31-year-old Wes Welker to pair with 24-year-old, 84 overall Percy Harvin, giving some more receiving help for Alex Smith on this Jets offense. And additionally, they bring in a right tackle. We see Vernon Carey, the Indianapolis Colts right tackle. He is an 81 overall, 31 years old, so a very solid addition there for the Jets O-line. He's the 6th ranked offensive right tackle in the league. They also bring in defensive middle linebacker David Hawthorne from the Packers. They already have Kirk Morrison, who's 30 years old, 81 overall. Hawthorne's only 65 overall, but he's a 27-year-old, so I wanted to bring some youth to the Jets team. And now for the New England Patriots. They happen to land the most coveted free agent on the defensive side of the ball. I mean, even there's many of them. The New England Patriots bring in Darrelle Revis. So even though Champ Bailey retired, even though Patrick Surtain retired and is gone, Corey Graham was the remaining cornerback. It's Corey Graham, Ellis Langster, Robert McClellan. I needed a star. A bunch of teams went after Darrelle Revis. The Jets even went after Darrelle Revis, but Revis decided to go with the New England Patriots. So the Patriots get a little bit more stacked on defense because they bring in the top cornerback in the league. I believe actually, let me double check. I think he is. No, he's the second best cornerback, only behind, or tied with Tim Jennings. The Patriots also bring in quarterback Tony Romo to be behind Tom Brady. And so Brady is a 35-year-old, 96 overall. Romo is a 32-year-old, 77 overall. I figured he's a lot better backup than T.J. Yates. We had the cap room to do it, so we did. The Patriots have Andre Johnson at receiver, Brandon Tate, Johnny Knox, and so they ended up signing Malcolm Kelly to help out with this team since they lost Josh Morgan as a wide receiver. So we see Malcolm Kelly coming in for the New England Patriots. As well, they sign tackle Geoff Schwartz. They do already have left tackle Eben Britton, but they're likely to move him to the right side to give them some more depth on that front. They also have signed the Atlanta Falcons' Thomas DeCoud. He is there to replace losing Brandon Merriweather, who is going to be very difficult to replace. But he's a 75 overall, 27-year-old. Definitely someone that is trying to fill that gap of the huge safety. Now, the Colts do end up bringing in Pierre Garçon. Even though he was drafted to the Colts in real life, he is now a 26-year-old, 75 overall wide receiver that was with the Titans and is now joining the division rival Colts. They also bring in Jacob Tamme. They'd still have Jeremy Shockey, the 32-year-old, 85 overall tight end. Jeremy Shockey is the fifth ranked tight end in the league. Tamme is just a 68 overall tight end, 27 years old, just getting some more depth and some more youth on this Colts team. The Jacksonville Jaguars make a splash, and they bring in Michael Griffin, the Vikings all-star safety. This is a huge addition to a team that's trying to compete in the AFC South. Without Peyton Manning, we can see a possible opportunity here for one of these other teams to start taking the lead. Even though the Colts still made the playoffs and did well in the playoffs, we see an acquisition like Michael Griffin to the Jaguars, a 92 overall safety, who happens to actually be the number 2 best strong safety in the entire league. He's only behind Dante Whitner. These Jaguars are moving in the right direction. They needed that superstar player because, quite frankly, they have Chris Long, who's the best defensive lineman they have, who's only 79 overall, but they have Patrick Willis at 96 overall, middle linebacker. So now they have a pass rusher, they have a middle linebacker, they've got Dunta Robinson, 87 overall cornerback, and Michael Griffin. They also signed wide receiver Steve Smith. This is not the Steve Smith Jr., this is the senior, this is more like Steve Smith Jr. They do sign quarterback Chad Henne. So they have only Zach Robinson and Nathan Brown, so they're trying to make some moves here for a real quarterback because David Carr is no longer with them. They also sign Ronald Fields as defensive tackle. They do have Senderick Marks, a 25-year-old. They have Jeff Owens, another 25-year-old, but they wanted some more depth, so they bring in the veteran Ronald Fields. And then lastly, they bring in Quentin Groves as outside linebacker. Groves is 28 years old. This team had a lot of 60s on that right outside linebacker spot. They have Darryl Smith, who's 30 years old. So I wanted to get someone in their prime, potential starter. So they do pull him from the Green Bay Packers. Actually, there's even more. So they picked up a few O-linemen. They pick up Steinbach, the 32-year-old from the Patriots, and they bring in Ryan Cook back up to be behind Mike Pouncey for this Jaguars team. The Houston Texans are pretty busy here, picking up a few wide receivers. We see they pick up Harry Douglas from their rival, the Jacksonville Jaguars, and they pick up Steve Johnson, who had a pretty good showing in the playoffs last year. Really, they just had Lewis Murphy, who is a 25-year-old, 73 overall. Yes, they have Titus Young, a 68 overall, but they needed some wide receiver depth. I mean, yes, the quarterback play was not very good from Jake Locker, but he also had no one to throw to. So this is Harry Douglas is a good receiving option for Jake Locker. Now, with Jake Locker mentioned, they did sign Vince Young, quarterback, 77 overall. He was the backup in Seattle, but he's a Texas native, so I thought that made sense. He will be competing against Jake Locker for the starting position. They do sign some depth at O-line, so Mike Pollock is going to be the starting center, 27-year-old for the Houston Texans. So that's a good addition for them, I believe. On defense, they signed Dre Moore from the Patriots. He is 27 years old, 74 overall. Stephen Pea is their current starter, 24 years old and 72 overall. Barry Cofield was their guy for a while, but he's starting to regress a little bit, 28 years old, 70 overall. So Dre Moore is has a good chance of being their starter. They do sign Bruce Davis, and he is potentially their starter on the right outside linebacker spot. They've got some challenges there. I mean, they do have Terrell Suggs and Foku on the left side, and then Bruce Davis likely on the right side. The Tennessee Titans land LaRon Landry. So this is a big addition. So all of a sudden we got the Colts who lose Brandon Merriweather, and both the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Tennessee Titans pick up some of the best safeties in the league. LaRon Landry, I believe, is the best safety or the best free safety and then only 1 point below Dante Whitner, who's a strong safety. So this is big addition for them. Huge progress going to be made. At quarterback, they do sign Byron Leftwich, the 32-year-old, 67 overall quarterback, to be behind Josh Freeman. So Pep Hamilton gets a veteran backup for his young quarterback. They do sign offensive line help, so they get Max Starks, and Max Starks is going to be likely competing for the right tackle spot with Tony Ugo. Ugo is 28 years old, 74 overall. Max Starks is 30 and 73, so Max Starks will likely be just the backup. However, they did bring in Donald Thomas, an 80 overall, 26-year-old. He's a very good guard, and he's young. He's 12th ranked in the league. He moves to help with this Titans offense that is trying to make that next step to triumph over the Colts. They do did sign Ben Lieber. Lieber is going to likely be their starting left outside linebacker, 75 overall. He is 33 years old, but he's going to be there with Sean Lee. He's going to be there with Anthony Spencer. And then on the defensive pass rushing front, they do sign Lawrence Jackson from the Arizona Cardinals, 27-year-old, 72 overall. And then you got Muhammad Wilkerson and Stephen Bowen on the other side, on the left outside linebacker. And there you go. That is the completion of the free agency. Here are some of the recaps for each division. The next video, we'll get some trades and draft coverage for this 2012 offseason.